was raised from birth to be a violent gang member, and maybe you were too. Now I know what you're thinking. Was he born in a gang-infested neighborhood? Are his parents gang members? Well, yes and no. My parents are highly educated, middle-class people, um, but they did raise me to be a gang member. Let's think back to our childhoods. Let me tell you about the things from my childhood: the toys, the comic books, the cartoons, the video games. Let's talk about those things. Transformers, G.I. Joe, He-Man, XMen, Avengers. What do all these things have in common? They're all about being in a gang and fighting violent wars against each other. That's literally all these shows were ever about. Acts of violence, extreme acts of violence, with technological super weapons. Mass murder. You buy a G.I. Joe toy, the accessory is an assault rifle. That's the toys that I played with as a 5-year-old. We give our kids plastic toy guns. But more importantly, we brainwash them with cartoons that are centered around violence. The X-Men is a gang of violent people. Imagine they have all these super magical powers, and the only thing they ever do with it is fight wars. All they ever do is run around and beat each other up like a bunch of morons, when those superpowers could easily heal this planet. But no, you can't heal the planet because you gotta fight the bad guys first, right? So who's the bad guys? The other gang. You have to be a gang member. You must be a gang member in our society. And everybody is. You see, because when you give your children violent toys that support mass murder, mass military violence, you're showing yourself that you're showing yourself to be part of the gang. Because that's why you're encouraging your child to be a gang member, because that's the gang that you're a part of, isn't it? I mean, think about it. Captain America and Spider-Man, their uniforms are red, white, and blue. And Spider-Man solves every single problem with violence. Everything. There's nothing he accomplishes that's not through violence. All these shows, all these cartoons, now we got the video games. First-person shooters designed by military technologists to make sure that their soldiers kill, to desensitize their soldiers to actual murder and killing. Because in the old days, it was found that people had a hard time killing each other. They would aim high. The military said, we need a higher kill rate. Let's make it fun to teach them, to desensitize them to committing murders. And that's the video games that you give your children to play with. So not only are you brainwashing them to believe that gang violence is good, and that the gang members are heroes, superheroes. That's what you're teaching your children. That's what I was taught. That gang members are superheroes. Why? What's so super about sticking a gun in someone's face? Why should I be impressed by that? Why should I be impressed by someone with superpowers, and all they do is going around punching each other. Do you think about the society that you're actually living in? What it really is? What you really are? What your entertainment really is? All the movies you watch? All the toys you give your children? The cartoons? People delude themselves into believing that these are harmless things. So you mean to tell me that there's a cutoff line, and at age 5 through 7, we can start showing our kids military desensitizing violence and sadism? Let's not forget about sadism, because sadism is an important component of the whole gang violence culture. Think about who the bad guys are in any of these toys or stories that I'm telling you about. The XMen or G.I. Joe, any of them. The bad guy is usually a sadist, someone who enjoys hurting people. We're teaching our kids about sadism in our cartoons. And you're delusional enough to believe that there's a cutoff point, and that when they have programming for kids under 5 years old, that it's not teaching them the exact same things. In other words, you believe that G.I. Joe cartoon is violent, but SpongeBob isn't? Do you really even think about the people who are programming your children? Because I was programmed. That's why I can talk about all these things. Because I was programmed too. I played with all the same toys and watched all the same cartoons as everybody else. Why is it that they don't see any problem with it? Why is it that they don't even see what it is? Or can admit it? Can we at least admit what it is? If you're going to say, oh, it's okay, I want my kid to learn about military mass murder. Okay, but just say that. Don't sit there and pretend that it's something that is not. We train our children to be gang members. Every movie that you watch that's an action movie centered towards boys is going to be about gang violence. Go be in a gang. It's exciting. It's fun. And it's the only path to power in this world. If you want to be in power, you have to be in a gang. And that's what it's all about, power. It's not about good guys versus bad guys. You would have to truly be a fool to believe that, and yet this is what we teach our children. And that's why people get tricked into being murderers, to go invade someone else's home, scream at them in a foreign language while they're eating dinner, while you're pointing machine guns at them. And then you can sit there and justify that to yourself and call them a terrorist. You see, that's why we do it. Maybe you wouldn't do that, but you still support it. Especially when you give your children mass media entertainment. You're a gang member. You're just a gang member who doesn't have the guts to actually go out and pull the trigger. But you're going to benefit from it. You're going to invest in the stock market so you can get rich off the gang violence. Right? So this is the hypocrisy. This is the level of hypocrisy that we have to deal with, and that this is the reason why I can't talk to most people. Because they're so deep in their own hypocrisy that they just want to make pretend. They want to make pretend that things aren't what they are. And even if you sit there and explain to them, they say, yeah. 5 seconds later, it's going to zip right out of their fucking dome. Delete. They hit the delete button. But the one thing they don't delete is the memory that they don't want to talk to you again, because you made them feel uncomfortable about the truth. And to anyone who thinks that you're gonna you're gonna change this society from being what it is by what? Voting? Having political arguments on the internet? Pushing a censorship button? You better wake up to the reality of what this beast really is. The people who delude themselves that this whole system is not based on war and violence and murder. And then they're going to sit there and give it to their children. And who me? It's going to be who me, because it's always fucking who me, isn't it? It's always who me. Not us. I didn't support a military dictatorship. Yeah, you did. Yeah, you fucking did. You invested in it. Nobody made you go out and invest in the stock market, knowing that stock market is dependent on our military violence. Nobody made you go out and push a button to vote for mass murderers. Nobody made you give your kids violent military sadistic brainwashing. Nobody forced you to do those things. You chose to do that and be a part of the gang and be a gang member and induct your children into being gang members just like I was inducted. That's the reality. So yeah, I was raised from birth to be a gang member. I was taught that violence in the right context is the greatest thing you can do. That makes you a superhero. And you were taught those things too. The question is, do you still believe it? It's the great plague.